Welcome to this IPN colloquium. As you know, with this colloquium series, we celebrate the achievements of 25 years of IPN. And I'm very pleased to introduce today's speaker to you. So it's Peter Wennink. He has been the CEO of ASML for more than 10 years until 2024. And after that, he did not just sit down and relax, but instead he developed and contributed to a report about how to translate the Draghi report about the future of Europe's earning capacity to the context of the Netherlands. And today he will give his vision on what this report means for the academic computer science community. Before he starts, let me say, if you have questions, please raise your hand and we'll try to switch on your camera so you can ask your questions in person. And now, Peter, the floor is yours.
Yeah, and perhaps two additions, or I would say, comments. Please, let's make this interactive. You might have questions, which I'm not addressing for whatever reason, because my head is not big enough to think about everything. So it's very important that you guys on the call feel free to just raise your hand, ask a question, and let's make this as interactive digitally as possible. And the report is, of course, more. It's just about more than just digital and information technology. It's about basically. Let me go back. When I retired, my wife told me that my life would be very different. That's not entirely true. I'm probably as busy as I was with ASML. So, and I always say jokingly, she always tells me you and I have a very different idea of the concept retirement. And the reason is that I have been concerned at my time at ASML as a CFO, but also more than 10 years, almost 13 years as CEO, about the let's say the lack of urgency that I felt in Europe and in the Netherlands when it came to the innovations that are ongoing, because they are addressing some of the major socio-economical transitions, around the globe. I spent a lot of time in China, in Korea, in Japan, in Taiwan, in Malaysia, in Singapore, in the US, and I saw that at that in those countries there was a very clear recognition of the fact that the world is changing very fast. Not only geopolitically, I think the global village, which was built during my tenure, basically through my entire career, is basically stopped working. Yeah, and we are, I would say, geopolitical and socially different parts of the world with different ideology, different socio-economic systems that are competing with each other on the fact that we need to create value, because those very big transitions create very big problems. You only need to think about life sciences and energy or climate solutions, and everybody tries to find a solution to that problem, thereby creating value. And why is value important? And this was my concern at the time, because I come from a background where basically we created in the Netherlands what I call a responsible society, where basically you have four key elements, four cornerstones, whereby in a responsible society, as many people as possible have a decent job, where they have decent income so they can afford a roof over their head and put food on the table and enjoy themselves. 1. 2, every child has the right to good education, because the creativity in every child needs to be fostered so that it can help the future. 3rd, which I think is extremely important, is that everybody who needs care has access to care at a reasonable cost. Because if the cost is not reasonable, not everybody has access to care. And 4th, there have to be safety. That's physical safety, digital safety, and also climate safety. So those 4 elements are, I think, the cornerstones of a responsible society. Now, is that a given? That's not a given. And my concern was that when I traveled, around the globe, that here in the Netherlands and greater part in Europe, we have actually built something that comes pretty close to what I just said. Yeah, but it's under pressure because we cannot sustain that if we don't realize that these major societal transitions, the digital transformation, life sciences, because the demographics on the northern hemisphere are against us. Yeah, so that means that we are getting an increasingly older population and needs to be taken care of. That energy is not a given in Europe. We simply are lacking natural resources that you can find in other places of the world. Climate change, and then security with the geopolitical developments, which of course when I was CEO at ASML I was right in the middle of. Yeah? Now when you see those things and you see what other countries are doing, I simply came to the conclusion we're not doing enough, by far not enough. And 4 years ago, or 3.5, 4 years ago, I called the Netherlands, but I basically said Europe, we're fat, dumb, and happy. Yeah, we're ignorant. Yeah, we're complacent, and this is why the Minister of Economic Affairs said to me, "You called us fat, dumb, and happy, and do you want to do something about it?" Which, by the way, is just anecdotal. There was a journalist at the time, there's a lady journalist that told me, "So, Mr. Wennink, you say we're fat, dumb, and happy. So you think I am dumb?" Well, I said, "Well, if you know you have a problem, it's a big problem, and we have problems. I just talked about this, and you know you have solutions, or at least the building blocks for those solutions, and you don't do anything about it. That's not smart." But I use the word dumb. It's about the same. Yeah. So, and this is exactly why I accepted the invitation to write a report about. Okay, so what do we need to do then? Yeah. I said, okay, I will do it. You have to give me some support because I'm not smart enough to write a report on my own. It's going to take a very long time. And it will focus on those four major societal transitions, which is the digital transition, the digitization, and everything that goes with that, which is semiconductors, photonics, AI, quantum. One, two, life sciences, which is about medical technology, about biotech, green biotech, red biotech, which is medical biotech, because we need to take care of an aging population. Three, energy and climate. We don't have the natural resources. We need to be smart on how we generate energy and electricity, basically electrons and molecules, if it's possible. Yeah. How do we store them? How do we distribute them? And how do we make sure they end up at the place where it can effectively be used to create value? Yeah. And a fourth, security, which of course the last 5 to 10 years has become almost dominant. I mean, if you look at the problems in the world, is in fact it's a realization of geopolitical reality that's very different than 10 years ago. Yeah. Now, so I said, okay, I want to focus on those areas because I strongly believe that in the Netherlands we have the building blocks in each of those four segments or domains where we can create an environment and a society where we innovate, and in close collaboration of business with knowledge institutions and government, we can find those solutions and we can create value, whereby also going forward, we will not only be a customer of the rest of the world that wants to sell stuff to us, and Europe and especially the Netherlands is rich, so we're very attractive, but we're also a supplier. We're also delivering value because we need that to keep that responsible society. Okay, so then the Minister of Economic Affairs said, whatever you want. I said, fine. So what we did, we thought about who should we ask, because I don't own wisdom. So basically we created a sounding board which says, this is what we want to do, give me some feedback. So this is what I think we should do. And they gave me some feedback. But lo and behold, these were a bit of the 15, 20 movers and shakers in the Netherlands. They also said, if you do that, Peter, we're going to help you. So I got help from McKinsey, from the Dutch Central Bank, from Rabo Research, from all sides, from VNO, the employer organization. Everybody gave me people. And within 2 weeks, I had 60 people, working for me. And then I said, okay, how do we do that? We go out there. And we basically, on those 4 domains, we go to these movers and shakers that you guys get together. Yeah? And we organized round tables. Every round table had to consist of business, from startup to multinational, all at the same table, knowledge institutions, universities, high schools, and government. And we said, okay, you got 3 weeks because I have 2 months, 2.5 months to write a report. And it needs to be about big things. So you have 2.5, perhaps 3 weeks to come up with a moonshot idea. And what I found amazing is that that group of people already knew each other. You know, they were the movers and shakers in semiconductors, in red biotech, in green biotech. So you had all these ideas, yeah, and they already talked about this, but it never happened. So within more or less 3 weeks, they came up with quite a significant set of moonshot projects and ideas in those 4 domains. I said, this is what we can do. And I said, why didn't that happen? Yeah. Well, because there are boundary conditions that we need. We cannot execute this because of these boundary conditions. What are these boundary conditions? So, and effectively across all those 30 plus round tables, same things came up. And it's all about infrastructure. We don't have the digital infrastructure to take us the next mile for the next 20 to 30 years. We don't have the logistics infrastructure. Yeah, we don't have the energy infrastructure either. And that holds us back because if we want to execute this moonshot idea, we run into the boundaries, and the boundary conditions are not met. That's one. Number 2 is talent. Basically, if we want to do this, we need more talent, but we need more talent that is basically has a background in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, because it is about innovation. And it is about absolutely also the digital transformation in every of those 4 domains. Whatever you touch digital. Yeah? Digital, I define it as a separate domain, but it is a layer which basically covers everything. Yeah. Okay, talent. And I said talent is not only education, because I think in the Netherlands we lack the focus on excellence, so that needs to come back. 2, we have no idea how big the impact of artificial intelligence will be on especially the service industry. And the service industry is the biggest economic sector in the Netherlands. And that will be affected most. So we need to also think about reskilling people that work there. Now, some of the people that work there that have a background in math because they now work at a big bank and they're an econometrist, they can also do all the other stuff. They will reskill themselves, but other people need to be helped. Yeah? Otherwise, we will have a lot of unemployment, which is not very good for a responsible society. And the third is we need foreign talent. Foreign talent is critical. We need to be the most attractive environment for Dutch talent for foreign talent to come to the Netherlands and become semi-Dutch, yeah? And work here. That is what we need. Now, the political environment on the last point is not supportive, but I think it's changing, and we'll come to that later. Yeah. Now, the last point is all these moonshot ideas did not happen because there was a lack of supporting regulation. People in China and in the US, they innovate. In Europe, we regulate. And that effectively holds, and I've said it many times, the innovation in the Netherlands and in Europe is very often effectively stopped by regulation. I have many examples of this, and we can have a discussion on it. Many examples where regulation stops innovation. Yeah? Because it's the legal profession that based on the laws and regulations that come out of Brussels, and in the Netherlands, we have gold-plated everything. So if there's a rule coming out of Brussels, we put a gold layer on it. We even make it tougher. Yeah? That needs to stop now. So we have 3 of those boundary conditions that need to be fulfilled. Infrastructure, talent, regulation. And the 4th one is capital. Yeah? Because the Netherlands is rich. When you take just the pension savings of all Dutch people, and you add to that the money have in their savings accounts that is returning almost 0, 1%, while inflation is 2-3%, so it's a bad deal. But if you add that all up, it's close to 2.5 trillion, 2,500 billion euros sitting there. So it's not a lack of capital. It's the fact that we haven't organized it so that capital can be accessed by those companies, those ideas, those startups, those ventures that need capital. And because it's so closed, it's not open, they turn to the US. So effectively, what you are seeing very often is that great inventions, ideas, startups that become scale-ups and worth billions end up in the US. So it's a kind of foreign aid, yeah, of the Netherlands to the United States. We should stop doing that and use the Dutch and the European capital to keep that innovation here and to create that value and that innovation so that we can participate in finding the solutions for these big societal transitions. Okay, so then we have everything solved. We have all the projects. We have 51 projects in our report, adding up to 126 billion euros worth of investment size. Yeah? We have solved the boundary conditions, the 3-1. We've solved capital. That's still not going to happen. Why? Because the government has not organized itself to facilitate this. The role of the government is not to manage or to lead, but to facilitate. If you create the boundary conditions, you create legislation so that innovation can thrive, companies, startups, universities, knowledge institutions, and semi-public institutions will get together, they will solve the problem. I'm convinced. But the government needs to organize itself in such a way that I believe they can be effective in taking away those barriers. Now, like every government, the Dutch government is, in my opinion, organized across silos. Those people are functional, responsible for something, for education, for infrastructure, for finance, for economic affairs. But they don't talk enough to each other. When you have a complex problem, you need a complex solution, which by definition is multifunctional. Yeah? So you need to have an organization that on these big societal challenges is organized in a way whereby these ministries have a push to work together to come to a solution. Yeah? Now that I did a proposal on that, which called a government commissioner. Well, the government, the new government didn't choose for that. They choose something else, but they're trying to do the same thing. So when we have all these things done, yeah, we have the ideas, we fix the boundary conditions, we have the capital, the government has organized itself. I am convinced Europe and the Netherlands can play a significant role in creating the value that is needed to fix the big societal challenges that we will see for the next couple of decades. And it's not for me. I will turn 70 next year. I can go to France. I own a winery, which I love wine. I can sit there and literally watch the sunset. Yeah, that's not how I feel. We have a responsibility. We created this. Yeah, we have a responsibility to create an environment where we can keep adding value to keep this societal responsible. There's all these building blocks are there. Yeah, it's not for me. It's for the next generation. It's for the young people, and it's for their children. It's the next 20 to 30 to 40 years. And we need to build that today because the rest of the world is doing that. Now, critical in that sense, and I said it before, is the whole digital revolution. I'm biased. I was the CFO and CEO of ASML, smack in the middle of the semiconductor industry. But also I'm an investor in an AI chip startup, very promising, super smart people. I'm an investor in deep tech because this is where it needs to go. And digital is a backbone here. And we have a Secretary of State as a State Secretary of Digital Affairs now. But if you realize that of all the compute power we're using daily in Europe, all the compute power is what we're doing now. We're using, compute power. Only 5% of that compute power is physically in Europe. 95% of that compute power is in data centers outside Europe. And that means that, if somebody decides to either cut the sea cables or, cut the internet or the satellite connections, we're blind. We're doomed. Yeah? So it is extremely important that we organize ourselves in such a way, not that we're completely, I would say, autonomous. I hate that word, strategic autonomy. That's a stupid word. Yeah, because you don't want to be autonomous, which means that you can do everything yourself. No. You need to be strategically relevant. You still need to have the capabilities and the competence so that other people take you serious. If you don't do that, and you don't have a seat at the table, you're probably on the menu. And that's exactly what will happen if we don't move. Yeah? And this is the message that we've been given in the report, with some very good examples of projects that we can start today. Some of them with a low TRL level, a technology readiness level, others with much higher. So this is the one we should start now on. Yeah? And the lower TRL levels, we should provide them with the means and the money so that they can grow and that they can develop those ideas into something valuable and something tangible. This needs to happen. And I think everything that has to do with digital is critical. And do we fully understand what it will bring us? No. It's with every innovation, it's exactly the same. It's always the same. If you start something, you innovate, you don't know what you don't know. You'll figure that out. Yeah. And it also means that, but you need to have the talent. You need to have the digital talent. You need to have the technical talent. Yeah, to be able to embrace these challenges and work together. Collaborative innovation is superior to individual, creativity. So you have to absolutely work together, collaboratively, and with all the combined intelligence, on the digital transformation to help in life sciences, to help in medical technology, to help in biotech, and to help in energy and climate, and to help in security. So it's a critical educational sector, which, by the way, I think also should be centerfold to what I call the reskilling. There are people who have actually the individual talent and competencies to be much more meaningful in the digital space, because some of the work they're doing today will be automated and will be, I think, replaced by artificial intelligence. Now, I don't know. I mean, I've been talking for a little while, and I'd like to close off with the fact that a lot of what we said in the report has been included in the government agreement, in the coalition agreement of the minority government, which is, by the way, also a problem, because if you want to change rules and regulations, then you need a majority in parliament, which of course will be there's a bit of negotiations that are going on, and we will lose time, valuable time. So this is an issue that we need to address, and that is my concern, is the fact that we don't have a majority in parliament to go fast. But the good thing is that it is written very clearly in the coalition agreement. So the direction of the government is clearly along the lines of the report. The secret is now in execution. And I think my biggest concern right now is that the government needs to organize itself to help the execution. Because we're always seeing these roundtables that I've organized, they keep going. They keep going, and they are organizing themselves, but they will run into these boundary conditions, into these brick walls. So, and that we need the government and politics to basically lower them so that innovation can create value. So I'm optimistic from that point of view. I'm not that optimistic on the speed with which things go, and I don't think we have the right ambition level. You have to have these big moonshot ideas, need big moonshot courage. Yeah? We need to have the courage to use the wealth that we have, to basically make sure that we, for the next 5 to 10 years, can start this absolutely necessary innovation in those 4 domains so that we can participate in what's going to be life-changing for the whole world. Yeah? And this is what we need to do. And so I'm positive on the start. I'm concerned about the speed with which we do things and the ambition with which we do things. Now, okay, 30 minutes left. So can I hand over to the moderator?
Yes, I can try to take over. If there are questions, please raise your hand and we'll switch on your camera. But of course, we should first thank you. And I see Paul has a question. So, and I'm online somewhere or on a conference, and I'm running out of battery. So I'm waiting for my savior to give me power. But maybe before you start talking, I have one question, because you've said a lot about that the knowledge institutes and we should train people and so on. And of course, that's half of my job. But the other half of my job, I do research. And so what in your point of view is what the knowledge institutes can contribute to research and innovation, and then of course in particular in the digital domain? Do you have any ideas about that?
Yeah, I think yeah, you need to separate a bit between what I call fundamental research. It's just embryonic research. We don't know what we don't know, and it's just curiosity. That's one. But I think there is applied research, and that needs to be in much closer collaboration with business. Yeah, because business requirements are critical, to understand. If you want to go to the next phase and create value in new products and new services, then it's essential that what you don't know is being held by knowledge institutions. So there's a much closer collaboration between business and the requirements of the market and the capabilities of the people that can do applied research. So not every research needs to be applied. This needs to be some fundamental. It's kind of the embryonic research that will actually fuel the know-how and the knowledge going forward. It's absolutely essential. But you need to get closer to the requirements of the market and the business. And I have found also as an investor that when ideas out of a university come to the point where a startup is created, very often the scientists have too little of knowledge and know-how of the end markets. It's almost like a product looks for a market, and it's in the minds of the scientists that there must be a market for this. Well, you quickly find out there's no market. Oh, the market wants something different. And you have to also realize what does the market want. So the market is looking for a product, and you need to find a way in which you have this intrinsic tendency of the product looking for a market, that the market wants to look for a product. You need to bring it together. You can only do that if you bring business and the scientists together, and then put the issue on the table. And I always say, when I was at ASML, I already knew that, the biggest confrontations were always between the boss of the factories and the boss of R&D. Because the boss of R&D always created modules and machines that you can't make. Because there was no intrinsic knowledge of what the practicalities are of industrialization, about quality, about serviceability, about durability, about all these things are just industrial parameters that very often are totally forgotten. When somebody has a great idea, which is important, because you need to have a great, but you have to bring this together. That's what universities should do a lot better. And then valorization, which is bad in the Dutch university world. I mean, when you look at our unicorns that come out of universities and you think about the money that we put into our education system, it is appalling. How much comes out of that? It's simply not good enough. It is societal investment. The Dutch Ministry of Education has a budget which is larger than the gross national product of Latvia. So and then if you then see which ranks higher in terms of the innovation standards. So we need to change that. Yeah, we need to actually change that, and that's a big task for the Minister of Education, but also a huge task for the universities. And I've been the chair of the supervisory board of the Technical University in Eindhoven. So it's not that I don't know what I'm talking about, because I talk a lot to those people. Yeah.
Yeah, but would that mean then that the universities would have to make sure that they have people that can bridge this gap, or do you say it's the scientists that should do it, the
No.
people with the
No.
brilliant ideas?
Yeah, the university, at least the university that I know, is that they have,
Yeah.
they organize, among competencies. Yeah. So if there's a competency in computer science, now the um, where is the meeting structure where the PhDs, but also the professors out of the computer science department talk to the companies that actually actively work on creating products for the market? Where are those meeting organizations? Did you do that? Yeah. Did you exchange ideas? Yeah, of what is needed and what the ideas are that come out of? How do you bring that together? Yeah. That needs to be an integral part of how a university should work. Yeah. You need to meet the market, needs to meet science, and science needs to meet the market. What you learned from both. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So Paul, I hand it over to you, and then I plug in my laptop. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, for this wonderful talk. At this moment, we are talking with the Ministry of Economic Affairs about artificial intelligence infrastructure, so more compute power for the Netherlands. And in those discussions, we still have to convince the policymakers that artificial intelligence is important and that we can really do something with it. We are discussing, for example, there was in 2000 an internet bubble, so there will become a artificial intelligence bubble which will collapse, and the promises of AI are not all met. Can you make that we really need some more compute power for art?
Yeah, you're breaking up,
artificial
Paul,
intelligence.
time to time. So the last part of your question, you actually broke up. So could you repeat it?
Yeah, about compute power for artificial intelligence and how we can convince the policymakers that we really need compute power for artificial intelligence.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah. Very good question. Goes to the. It's a question to my heart. Because how should I say this? I organized 2 weeks ago or a week and a half ago as a meeting between one of the largest venture capital companies in the US, Innovation Industries, which is a venture capital firm in the Netherlands, a start scale up in photonics, an executive vice president of ASML, and myself. And I invited the Director General Economic Affairs and the Director General, the Treasurer of the Ministry of Finance. And what you found that especially for the finance people, if you talk about AI, if you talk about photonics, if you talk about what the building blocks are, the technical building blocks for AI, far over their head. Yeah, no idea. But I think the biggest problem in the government these days is they lack the knowledge. It used to be 40 years ago. This is and I actually, when I was a lot younger, I had a lot of respect for the civil service because they were content people. And currently, you have not enough people that are knowledgeable on content in the government. So when you come with something, they have no idea what you are talking about. So what you need to do, it's about education. You cannot just once in a while talk to these people. It goes back to the previous question. You should not only organize this like a meeting setup between business and the knowledge institutions, the university, but also the government and the knowledge institutions. it's always the same. You go to the government when the knowledge institutions are, you're almost running against a brick wall. So now you want to talk. It's always too late. It's because these people don't understand. Yeah? And it's just a fact. Yeah? They get it. They get it intellectually that something is happening. I'll give you one particular example. I'm also, in my report, I said one of the projects we need to do is an AI gigafactory, which basically the gigafactory needs to be built. We have the people who want to finance it. We have the people who want to give the space. We have the people who want to give the energy. It's all signed in blood. Yeah. So basically, we could build an AI giga fab in the Netherlands. Yeah. Everything's there. The only thing that we want is that Europe says, okay, we are going to subsidize 4, perhaps 5 of AI gigafactories. We're going to pay 35%, 1/3 of the capital expenditure to set it up, which is 20. No, it starts with 10 billion. Yeah? So you can go to Europe. They can be as a big subsidy coming. Now the only thing that Europe wants is that, but we want the government in the country that's going to build that AI gigafab to give us a commitment that they will take off 300 million euros of that data capacity, of that compute capacity in 10 years time, 30 million per year. That is chicken shit. That's absolutely. I know AI startups that spend 30 million per year, a startup on pure compute power. Yeah. So it's a no-brainer. Yeah. Now, vote it down. The new Secretary of State of Digital Affairs says we're not going to do it because it will be financed by private money. Yes, it can be financed by private money, but the European Commission wants to give 30%, 35% of that capex number. If the government says over a period of 10 years, I'm going to give you a commitment of 300 euros worth of offtake of that compute power with everything that the government does, it's a no-brainer. Yeah, and still they don't want to do it because they don't understand. Because 300 million euros in the Ministry of Finance is a frighteningly big number. Yeah, they don't understand the context. Yeah, that is nothing. Yeah, that you can easily do that. Now, I think that AI Gigafactory, the people who want to create this are still going to do it. It's going to be completely privatized. But you walk away from a European initiative that wants to give you 1/3 of the investment if you give a commitment of 300 million euros or 30 million per year, yeah, of offtake. Now, that's a typical example of that the government simply doesn't have the know-how. It doesn't have they don't know what it's all about. And that is what we need to infuse. So we need to start in a much earlier phase to have very regular meetings with them because they're not dumb people. They're smart people. Only it's not their competence. They need to be educated. And we only start to educate at the end. Yeah. When they basically say, but we don't understand this. If you need to take a decision and somebody asks you money for something that you don't understand, I think 99 out of 100 times you say, no, I'm not going to do it. That's exactly what's happening. Yeah. So it's our problem. Yeah. We don't educate those people. We need to be there continuously. Yeah. Now, I hope I made it clear. It's our problem. Yeah?
Thank you.
And I see Willem has a hand. So I hope you can. Yeah.
Willem Jonker.
Yeah.
I can see, neither hear you, but.
Okay. I hope it should. I hope it's going to work. Well, while we wait for Willem, I have another question, and that is, so you talk about that we have too much regulation, and that stops innovation. But sometimes regulation also can be good, right? To protect people. If you think about privacy, for example, I think it's actually quite important that there is some regulation to protect people because they don't know what they're doing. So how do you see the balance between that?
Give you a good example, and I totally agree with you. There's misuse of personal information which we should prevent. But for instance, it is for the Dutch biotech industry and medical technology industry, it is extremely difficult to get access to non-personalized data. Non-personalized, yeah. So and you can do that, yeah. Why? Because they need to have that data lake of information, so they can use their AI applications, yeah, to basically go faster in terms of R&D and new product development. That's a major issue. Now, there's nothing wrong, which by the way is in the Netherlands. Yeah, there are European countries where they didn't gold plate this whole rule, yeah, and it's possible. So we put ourselves at a disadvantage, whereby this is not about trying to get really I would say a sensitive personal data to be misused. No. We simply take it too far. Yeah, and this is a typical example where you would help enormously. Yeah, the biotech industry and the medical technology industry, if you would ease on that regulation. I'm not for deregulation. I'm for simplifying it. There are other regulations on state aid, which European state aid, that are much more severely interpreted by the Dutch government. We should not do that because it stops innovation. Yeah?
Okay, thank you. And Willem?
Yeah, I think meanwhile the doors have been opened by your intervention, Marika. Thank you. Peter, yeah, I'm sitting here as a participant of the University of Twente, where I also teach, so not so much in my capacity as the AI work that I'm also doing. But I recognize very much what you are saying, and that's what you see in the government, that on the one hand, they lack the true understanding of how the mechanisms work in this innovation in AI. On the other hand, they are quite willing to ask for help, because they ask you to write a report. They ask the field to come up with different things. So they seem to be open for help. And then where it always stops is when money gets involved, because then you get the discussions like 300 million. I know for the AI factory, which is only a small thing of 200 million, we have been talking for 2 years almost to get 70 million out of the pockets of the government. So, and that's also what is always stopping things. So on the one hand, I fully agree, permanent education and the permanent dialogue is extremely important. But how can we solve this money problem? Because even although I'm talking almost on a weekly basis with those people, in the end, you see the letter that went to the chamber saying, yeah, sorry, we can't commit to this. And then the money goes, right? So yeah. How do we address this money issue?
Yeah, well, it's a couple of things. I talked about this in the report. I asked for a national agency of disruptive innovation, which basically is 2 billion. Came out with 500 million, still 500 million, but I think it's not ambitious enough. And I think we also need to have a national investment bank. Yeah, mm-hmm. And I think when you are very early start, you should really look at this National Agency of Disruptive Information. But when you're further down the line, the National Investment Bank is a government bank which is at a distance of politics. So it's an independent organization with a supervisory board that actually has access to the international money and capital markets. Yeah? And they are together, because I did have that discussion with the major banks in the Netherlands, with pension funds, with venture capital, with private equity. They want a partner in crime, which is government related. Because if you have to invest something big like 500 million or 2 billion or 3 billion, that finance is always built up in layers, in so-called risk layers. And the innovation from TRL 1 to TRL 10 is a function of risk. Yeah. So when you're early phase, it's subsidy. From 4 to 7, it's risk capital. From 8 to 9, it's just plain vanilla, financing. But there's no vehicle in the Netherlands. We need a national investment bank. That, by the way, is now actually, if anything's happening, the government and the Ministry of Finance is now working, and I know because they're including the banks and the pension funds, of how should we set this up. So this will come. Mm-hmm. Yeah? That will be a vehicle where these large infrastructural investments can be done. That's one. Two is the government, finance of the government is basically built up very traditionally between income and expense. And there's nothing in between. So this is how they budget. The national budget, the annual budget, is how much tax money are we getting and where does it go to? And it should be within a 3% gap. Yeah, that's all. While if you think about investments, yeah, if you invest something, let's say you're a household. When you buy a house, you call it an investment. You lend money and that you buy the house, and the house you will live in for 30 years and it's depreciated every year, while in fact you create value because house prices are going up. So basically you invest to create value. But you also spend money to buy food, which is consumption. So the government simply doesn't have an instrument that distinguishes between consumption and investments. And I had a discussion with Elko Heijnen, the Minister of Finance, and he said, Peter, and that's why I call for it, you really need to have a government definition of what an investment is. Yeah? This is a one-time expense to create future value spread over a number of years. And an investment, if you go to some political party, said, well, we need to invest in the happiness of our people. You can also call that an investment, but I call that consumption. Yeah. So but if you don't have something like that, the discussion, and you only have the national budget, which is how much tax income do we have, how much, and you don't even think about how much of our lending power we have, yeah, with a national debt which is less than 50% of our gross domestic product. Then you say you can only take a sliver of this, and you have enough money to put into a national investment bank, to put into NADI, yeah, to just create this base in which you can invest, yeah, and that is where it lacks. It all comes down to Elko Heijnen says, if I don't have, a clear definition of what an investment is to create future value, how can I then distinguish between, project A or project B? Yeah? One is clear consumption and other is real investment. That's where we need to start.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So, and I think, Peter, you said you have to stop at 5. So we have Sjaak, and then there's Cicek, and we'll see how far we get. But Sjaak,
I will shorten my answers, but it's complex.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sjaak Brinker, Utrecht University. I read your report with great interest, but I see that the technology domains where you're proposing in digital, life sciences, energy and climate and security, the emphasis is mainly on multidisciplinarity. Now, and multidisciplinarity in terms of scientific fundamentals. Now I see that our universities, our knowledge institutions, but also the funding mechanisms and the committees are very much focused on single disciplines, and you only get promoted when you are a good one in the core of physics or in the core of mathematics, but not so much when you're bridging. And I myself, have a startup in automated speech reporting, which combines AI and linguistics, so in the humanities, into the medical and in the social field. And me and my fellow startup owners, we are hindered by this single disciplinarity of our institutions. Do you foresee changes in that?
Yeah, well, if you go through the 51 projects that we put into our report, all multifunctional. They all are, and I think complex problems very often need complex solutions, because if it was simple, we would have already done it. Yeah. So it actually means it's like ASML. What I've learned is that the only way to solve a significant problem is to put multifunctionality together and to reward multifunctionality. And that's not the way that we reward our universities. Because how many publications have you done? How many awards have you won? It's on this single-sided content discipline. Yeah, and that is not how you solve complex problems. We need that as absolutely essential. Yeah, we need that, but we need to have this mechanism that puts this together, whereby in an answer in an earlier answer I gave to a question of Viewmaker, I said you need to involve also, and especially when you build a startup, what is the demand out of the market? So it is not only the multidisciplinary approach of the product, but also the market saying, what kind of functionality do I want? And then it could be very well be that you come to the conclusion that the group that you have assembled is not complete. That you need, for instance, from the human science, you actually need additions. Yeah, so you have to bring that together, and then you find white spots. Yeah, and that is how we also should. And this is why I'm not proposing yet, because that will be a huge task to change the complete financial function of the Ministry of Education vis-a-vis the universities. But what we can do is say, if we have those projects, which I think those projects deserve the kind of funding that we just talked about, and said, that funding will be available, but the precondition is it is multifunctional.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so you won't get it if you cannot show to me that it's multifunctional and that there is a market demand that actually drives that functionality. Yeah, and that should be done. Yeah?
Thank you.
And Cicek? Yes.
Hi, Çiçek Güven from Tilburg University. Thank you for the nice talk. I don't have too much time, so I will keep it quick. So you made this point about valorization, which is missing, maybe not there enough in the knowledge institutions, basically. And of course, I think personally, it is important to incentivize people. And of course, part of this is coming from, hopefully, from the universities by reconsidering success factors, what is considered to be important to be considered to be a successful scientist, right? But also what we see missing is resource allocation problems. So maybe more resources should be created for the researchers to be able to to invest more time in grant applications, or because it's really difficult to it is becoming more difficult if you spend a lot of time and then you have small chances of getting the grants accepted or granted. So do you see in your discussions with all these parties that there are any considerations about creating more resources for the researchers, or not necessarily more, but varying ways of supporting people, not maybe with money only, with time, with means? So I'm curious about this.
Yeah, I think yes, but again, I said earlier, you have to distinguish between what I call some of the fundamental research and the monodiscipline, very deep content research, and research which is more a function of the combined functionality that you need, to solve this problem. Now, if you apply for a grant, very often it's still very traditionally goes into the monodiscipline content. But increasingly, especially in Europe now, there are new multi-billion-dollar funds being created, which actually focus on a problem. And the bigger the problem, the more multifunctional. So I think looking at that, there could be a better chance for the combination of researchers on a specific functional problem, and to do that together, and still go deep in the content. And I think more money will be made available. But I think it's not only the money. I think it's also the definition of the functional problem that will require more functional attention from researchers. I think that is going to be more important. That's what I see when I go to Brussels. It's about finding solutions for significant problems which need significant innovation. That is where I think a lot of the attention will go. All that having said that, I think we should also have funding available, and that means that you should have the time to actually do that on something which is fundamentally important to get researched. I think that is almost like that's the embryonic state of science. We need to keep fueling that. And that is important. And And that means if there's more money, you have more time, you can have an extra PhD or to actually work on the, this. But I can assure you that currently, when you talk to the policymakers, they want to fix more complex as a multifunctional issues, yeah, and they're more inclined to just be positively, positioned, vis-a-vis, something like that. You just need to be prepared. Yeah, that's going to happen.
Thank you.
Good, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think time is almost up. I have 1 minute to close off, so I want to thank everybody for participating. I want to thank you very much, Peter, for your insightful presentation, and I hope it was also nice for you. And I want to say, so this week there will be ICT Open, where we as a computer science community gather. So that's sort of the official closing of the 25-year celebration of IPN. But we have decided to continue with this colloquium at a lower frequency, but you will get invitations for follow-up events. And we hope that you all will be joining there. And thanks for now.
Yes, I mean, one last comment. I mean, the questions were very much in line with what we've picked up in, writing the report. So I think the solutions, the government solutions, need to be in the directions that we just, discussed. Yeah? And as far as I'm concerned, I'm an optimist that worries a lot. Yeah, and I think we're moving in the right direction, but with not enough speed. And I think the ambition level should be higher. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you all for your time.
Yes.
Thank you.